Right. Take it away.
All right, I'm James Conroy, Jim. I worked at Temple University for 17 years, and that's where we did this study that I'm going to tell you about. And Jean Searle.
Hi. Hi. I would stay up, but as you can see, I am recuperating.
What happened, Jean? I'm her straight man.
What happened was this last year, February 13th, I got very, very sick, and I had to be in the hospital for 7 months because
Jean, hold it a second. Jean, sorry. Folks on Zoom, please keep yourselves muted. Hello, Cheryl on Zoom. Please mute yourself. Please leave yourself muted if you are on Zoom. Thank you. Thank you, Marilyn, for that note. Okay. Sorry about that, Jean.
we haven't seen you here in the front, everybody. Sorry, that's why I went to the front.
All right. Well, let's try introductions again. Jean is a Pennhurst class member. Jean would have been sent to Pennhurst, but for the court order, which you'll hear about. I am the guy who followed all the people out of Pennhurst when I worked at Temple University, and we visited every person every year as they left and went into community homes for 14 years, face to face, every person every year, and we surveyed every family every year. So we really know a lot about them. And we're going to talk about that and Jean's story and my story. But mainly, I think the point I'd like you to leave with is that something really important happened right here, and nobody knows about it. It's affected the entire world. That'll be it. And Jean, you were just saying that you had a leg?
I had a leg amputation last year, February 13th. I had really bad diabetes, and I almost died. Yeah, I got very, very sick.
And then there was a gathering of people who used to live at Pennhurst in July at Holy Family University. And Jean was fighting really hard to be able to walk into that thing, and she did. So we have pictures to prove it.
It's not working now. Great.
It's the computer.
Yeah, Cheryl, somebody is still on.
It looks like there's a little thing crossed out so you can get in at least. You won't hear anything.
It was working before.
There you go.
Ah. All right, let's see.
You want me to move this?
No, I think I'll walk around.
Okay.
First of all, we'll try to tell personal stories because that makes the presentation less boring. I did a lot of research on Pennhurst, and then I did the same study in 10 other states and several other countries. Jean's life experience, and we'll go back and forth during the presentation between us, between stories and research and so forth. This is one of our favorite ways to start. That's me on the left. That's the good-looking one. And Jean on the right. We tell each other stories because we wound up at the same place. We were co-presidents of the Pennhurst Memorial and Preservation Alliance. And the purpose of that group is to maintain the memory of what happened at Pennhurst and what we did to people who lived there, so we never forget. Well, I grew up with great parents in the suburbs. I went to the best schools. I got great jobs. I got a Ph.D. 20 years I owned my own company. I served on several boards, and I wound up Pennhurst Memorial Preservation Alliance co-president. I did not pull myself up by my bootstraps. I was given every gift anybody ever got. Jean, you grew up in foster homes. Go ahead.
I grew up in foster homes. I also grew up in 2 different institutions. I had mom and dad that were both alcoholics, and
Oh, I know, Gene, you don't have your glasses on.
Yeah, I have my glasses with me. I don't have them on.
Well, Gene grew up in a foster home and then 2 institutions, which we'll talk about. But now Jean is one of the state's leading advocates. She's met every governor for, the past several administrations and serves on boards all over the place. And now wound up at the same place. We were both co-presidents of the Pennhurst Memorial and Preservation Alliance, which is an organization devoted to remembering. I'm going to start with my background, my interest in Pennhurst. I got out of college in 1970. I had a degree in physiological psychology. No idea what to do with it. Very interesting, but my mom said, Jimmy, what are you going to do with a degree in that? And I said, plenty, Mom, you can. Oddly, by pure chance, I got a strange job in Washington, D.C., working on a national survey of people with disabilities. And I had studied brain research, and I thought, well, that fits. And it looked interesting. And this was right at the peak of putting American citizens into public institutions, 1970. That was our peak. We had 300,000 people with what was then called mental retardation, which is now called intellectual disability. We had 300,000 people. I'm sorry, 200,000 in those settings. So, in doing that study, the first thing I got to do, 22 years old, was get in my father's Chevy and drive up to a place called Pennhurst to find out what was going on there. And we were doing scientific studies of quality of life and needs, service needs, and so forth, and trying to figure out what this new law was the Developmental Disabilities Act of 1970. And America wanted to know what impact would that law have? What good would it do? So we had to learn about the people. I drove up to Pennhurst, and I found, near Valley Forge, you all know, and I drove home crying. There were...
Wait, go back. I thought you picked something out of a hat.
I skipped part of our story.
And it was Pennhurst, and you didn't know what it was till
Yeah,
you.
this is the role of fate or chance in our lives. In this company that I was working for in Washington, we had to draw a sample of places to visit. And I had taken statistics and no one else had. So I designed this great scientific sample. I cut up a bunch of guidebooks, put them into a cardboard box with each, pulled out pages. And I pulled out Pennhurst. That's it. And I'm here today. So it was awful. It was 3,000 people. These are some of the sites. Beds 6 inches apart. Lonely and nothing to do all day. That's a day room. That's the kind of place I walked into at age 22. It was the Keystone Hall that I walked into. I had never seen people with severe disabilities because, they weren't allowed in our public schools. And nobody like that was anywhere near Yale University. So I had no idea. So I walked in and this kind of thing is what I saw. And in the ward I walked into, there were about 50 men, at least half in states of undress, with nothing to do, a lot of screaming, a terrible smell, and stereotypical behaviors. And there were little children too, in cribs that they never got out of. They had equipment to teach little kids to walk, but they didn't have enough staff to do it.
Are these your photographs, Tim?
No, they're on the PNPA website, and they came from sources who, like Burton Blatt, who visited institutions all over the country, published his photographs.
And what year was this that you were
That was
there?
1971.
Thank you.
And now, switching to Jean, Jean grew up in places like this, and that is one of them. Over to you.
Yeah, this is, I think that's Allied Services.
That's right.
And I lived here for 17 years.
And this is a picture of, all the children that were at Allied Services. And was this preparation for a Halloween party?
Yeah, and people were trying to figure out who I was.
I'm sorry, hang on, folks, are you, folks on Zoom, are you not seeing the PowerPoint?
I think Cheryl is.
Oh, okay, all right, so thank you, all right. Okay, thank you for confirming.
It's okay?
Yeah, for some reason I thought we didn't turn it on, but it's on, okay.
Are we okay?
We're okay, Gene, thank you, sorry about that, interrupting
All right.
again.
This was at a Halloween party. They had everybody together. We were asking the audience if they could pick me out for all the pictures, and the picture in there.
And one of the things we used to do is, if we had time, try to find Gene in that picture. This is what it's like to live in a big group.
Right,
Second
here.
row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ready?
Right.
You get it? Nice. In those, by the way, in the early years, we're going to talk about Gene's other institution later. But in the early years, this is a real thing. I didn't make this up. This is real. This is 1900. The menace of the feeble-minded. There was a pamphlet like this in every state in the U.S. because there was a trend, a scientific thought process, a paradigm called eugenics, which is Greek for good birth. And it meant that people who had disabilities or were different shouldn't be allowed to reproduce. Eugenics. It was like, cattle breeding. And it dominated social thinking for 50 years, from 1880 to 1930s, and it's still with us. But eugenics is what caused these things to be made. This is the kind of pamphlet, we had one in Pennsylvania, it's the kind of pamphlet that said, we have to watch these people, they're dangerous, and we have to separate them. And that's what we did. And that was what Pennhurst represented when it was built in 1908. It was a place to put those people. They're different, and they shouldn't be allowed to reproduce. In 1968, just before I got to Pennhurst, a local reporter named Bill Baldini did an expose. And man, that changed the world. That brought it into our living rooms. Until then, everybody could say, well, I don't know what goes on out there. I don't know. I think it's a good place. And then Baldini, great story, he happened to be in a hotel, and somebody from the ARC, that's used to be the Association for Retarded Children, ARC. Then it became the Association for Retarded Citizens, and now it's just ARC, in an effort not to use labels anymore, so it's ARC. There's an ARC in Pennsylvania, there's an ARC in Montgomery County, there's an ARC in Chester County, there's an ARC in the U.S. It ran for 5 nights, and after it happened, the ARC of Pennsylvania hired an attorney to do something, because it was like all those pictures I showed you, and worse. And he interviewed people too. And by the way, all 5 nights of Stuff and Little Children, about 8 minutes each, is on our website, so you can actually still watch it. In fact, training that goes on all over the Commonwealth, all over the country, uses that to train people about what we used to do and how different it is now. The attorney they hired advised not immediately, don't close Pennhurst, rather close the front door. Children were sent to Pennhurst in their adolescence because they got big and their families, many of them had to have 2 jobs and they couldn't leave the home. So for many reasons, people were sent to Pennhurst in their teen years. Mainly they weren't allowed in public schools. And that is what the attorney recommended. Let's try to get a right to education for all children. And Pennsylvania was the first in the world. The ARC filed a lawsuit for the right to education. It was settled in 1971, signed and implemented in 1972. And it was the first in the world. Happened right here, the right to education. And it became federal law 4 years later, 1974, 75, and it was called it had many names, Education of All the Handicapped Act. Now it's called IDEA, Individuals Disabilities Education Act. So that's where it came from, right here. And I love that because nobody knows it. And the greatest story I have about it is the attorney, he, brilliant, eminent fella, and he apparently got a meeting with the governor. He told me, he sat down with the governor, pulled out the Pennsylvania Constitution, didn't say anything about the lawsuit, he just pointed to the place and said, Commonwealth is responsible for educating all its children. According to him, the governor said, that does say all, doesn't it? And he settled it.
Oh, I love this picture.
So Bill has become a friend over the years. That's Bill Baldini on the right. He's one of the great, well-loved news people of our generation, and he's retired now and traveling a lot. But we have lunch with him, whenever we can.
But I love to hear all his stories.
He's one of the greatest storytellers out there.
Yeah, he is.
There's a Bill Baldini Day in Philadelphia, and Bill is, of course, Italian, and they gave him St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. It's just Philadelphia, folks. When I got to Pennhurst, there were 2,800 people there. It was assigned for about 700. Young people were left in cribs all day and night. Bill Baldini mentions that there were 21-year-old people still in cribs. They didn't have time. They didn't have staff. Broken bones, often untreated. Problem people, you bit somebody, you were disciplined. If you bit somebody again, all your teeth came out. That happened to hundreds of people.
But this is without anesthesia.
We documented that. It was done because,
Yeah.
my God, Gene. In those
Look at
days,
that.
the dentist would say things like, they don't feel pain like we do. I saw myself that bathing was done in a group with a hose and a drain in the center of the room. And again, I just couldn't believe it. I had just gotten a degree from Yale University, and I came out and saw it. I didn't know this was here. And it turned out there were 200, 300 places just like it around the country. I had no idea. So why treat human beings this way? Bill Baldini pointed out, in 1968, the average cost per person at Pennhurst was $5.90 a day, and the average cost for a leopard was more. It was $7.15 in the richest nation on earth. So that was an outrage. It's a question of skewed values, and that's where we were in 1970. Now, after the Right to Education suit in 1974, the ARC of Pennsylvania decided, okay, now we've got kids going to school. That's really good. The front door, people won't be sent to Pennhurst anymore. Now what do? And the answer was, we have to sue to either make it better or close it. And they did. And Terry Lee Halderman was the lead plaintiff, and she had severe disabilities, very little speech, able to feed herself, but that's about it. And on behalf of her and 8 similar people, a suit was filed in federal court by the Public Interest Law Center of Philadelphia, same attorney as the Right to Education.
I thought
And
there were 2 attorneys.
there were many, but I'm going to just talk about Gilhul, because he's the only guy who you made shut up. Gilhul would talk all year if you didn't stop him. We had a conference with him, and he was going overtime. What stopped him?
Me.
I just walked up and said, Tom, it's time to go. Tom thought, well, I work for you.
At that time, I was his boss.
Yeah. A federal court handed down a decision after the longest trial in mental health, mental deficiency, mental differences, longest trial in American history. And the decision was handed down on March 17th, 1978. And 9 years later, Pennhurst closed. So if you were around here in those years, you probably heard all kinds of stuff about people moving out of Pennhurst and dying. And now we're here to tell you what we found out when we visited every person over here. the judge ordered that every person would have a chance to live among the rest of us. It's kind of that simple. And I didn't believe it would work. Because just before this, America shut down most of its psychiatric hospitals. And we just put people out on the street with 30 days of medication. And now, 50 years later, now what have we got? Homeless, and 40% of prisons are people with severe and persistent mental illness. Biggest mental health facility in America is the Los Angeles County Jail. So because of that history in America, which we betrayed and abandoned people with mental illness horribly, I thought we'd do the same thing. So I started this study of what would happen. Deinstitutionalization is the big word. And I wanted to do research on it. And I worked at Temple University at the Institute for Disabilities. And I had a chance to get a federal grant. And we did.
But the bill said to us that he regret everything that he did by closing Pennhurst, but he thought everybody that lived in Pennhurst lived on the street.
We bounce off each other.
And we know that that was not true.
Because of what I just said, that reminded you. I called Bill Baldini. I'm very scared of famous people. I was this, kid at Temple University. I called him and said, Mr. Baldini, Pennhurst closed today, and I wanted to say thank you for all you did. And he said, this is no kidding. He said, that's the story I did that I'm most ashamed of. What? He said, yeah, all those people are homeless now, aren't they? And I literally said this. What a schmuck. I said, boy, Bill, are you lucky you called me today.
At that time, how many residents were at Pennhurst?
1,156.
To be integrated.
On March 17, 1978, there were 1,156. And those are the people we tracked for the next 14 years. Now, they were an average of 39 years. They've been at Pennhurst an average of 24 years since adolescence. 64% male, 1/3 seizures, 13% blind, so on and so forth. But 50% did not speak. They didn't use language, and still don't. This was people who had, well, look at the last one. 86% were labeled severe or profoundly mentally retarded. Archaic term, that's what they called it then. And that meant that the rest of us thought that their IQ was below 35. The average is 100. And genius is about 140, but 35 is, these were no cream puffs. These were people who needed a lot of help. And 40% were reported to be violent, about half less than fully toilet trained. So the idea to move these people into small community homes looked just challenging, maybe even ridiculous. And that's how I felt at the time. So the Pennhurst study began in '79. It was a time, the biggest one ever done. Notice I said earlier 1,156. There were 2 people who slept off campus that night, and we didn't know what to do with them. Because the definition was people who slept at Pennhurst on that date, but that is so unimportant. Why did I tell you? And surveyed is misspelled. We measured qualities of life, satisfaction, and costs, and the process went on for years because after we did the research, then Pennsylvania made it into monitoring. Hey, you're going to visit everybody every year. Why don't you find out how they're doing and report back? So we did. It became a monitoring system. Now, some of the results. This is self-care. Self-care for people in 1978 on the left, there was a score of about 60. After these people left, there's about 500 people represented on this graph. After they left, their self-care abilities went up to 71. But the really exciting thing was, not only did they gain when they left Pennhurst, but they kept learning new stuff every year. And that's why the graph goes up, up, up. And there had been past studies of people leaving institutions, and we knew they became more able to care for their own needs. We knew that already. We did not know that community settings would help them learn year after year after year, which they did. They became more and more independent, able to do stuff for themselves. A lot of people had challenging behavior, and this graph shows that people became more and more able to control their own behavior. That's why the numbers go up. But it's the same thing. People got better and better, as it were, better outcomes, less challenging behavior, more able to control themselves. from damaging or hurting self and others. So we had two results. Self-care went way up, challenging behavior went down. And then families. This is stunning. When this started, and if you lived around here, you probably know the families were dead against this. Like 74% completely against it. And for a sample of, I think this graph has about 412 people on it. We surveyed families before and after people left. And in the beginning, you can see at the bottom of the chart, about 63% of families strongly disagreed with community placement. They thought the judge was wrong. They thought their sons and daughters would be harmed. And another 9% disagreed, but it's just really strong. Families were not in favor of this. And that made it really hard. Whose choice is it? Somebody told me, hey, we're gonna move your daughter from that school and you don't have any say in it. I would get their home address.
Yeah,
Nobody
but
tells me that. And that's how hard it was.
But they're still saying that today.
Yeah, this goes on. By the way, what we're talking about is happening in every country in the world. And it's happening in, I've been to the Republic of Georgia, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Serbia, Kosovo, Sweden, Finland, Mexico. It's all going on. We all did it. All of us humans did this. We put different people away and we're trying to bring them back. But the families are going through a meat grinder. It's really tough. I mean, imagine, a gentleman here said that one family did not put their son in an institution, but those who did were told this is the best thing. Now later, the same kind of people with Ph.D.s and M.D. come back and say, that was a horrible thing you did. That's the meanest thing I can imagine. And it wasn't true, because at the time, it was the right thing to do. What we should have been saying is, I think we found something better, which we did. So, families were against it, but look at them after the move happened, after their relatives went into community settings. At the top is very satisfied with the new community home, and the next bar is somewhat satisfied, and so on. So in this sample, I guess it was about 412 families. The overwhelming result was families had gone from opposing it to favoring it. And I got hundreds of letters in the surveys. We did surveys by mail. I got hundreds of, handwritten letters at the end, basically saying, I can't believe I was against this. And this was the best thing that ever happened to Alfred. That sort of thing. You could be touched all day with those things.
But as we're still closing the institutions, some people are happy because they want to go back to the institution. And,
One of them lives right here.
yeah, couple of them.
Yeah.
Don't look at me.
No. There are a few people, we interviewed all these people and we found 6 who reliably said they'd rather go back out of 1,156. Remember, most people couldn't actually talk to us in an interview, so we had to interview their relatives and the staff who were closest to them. But there were 6 people who said they'd like to go back. And we've learned since then that the person who lives around here, she was like a trustee of the facility. She had a cigarette business going. She was very capable, and she just loved it there. She grew up there, and she had the run of the place, and she would have liked to go back. But for 99% of her brothers and sisters, it wasn't like that. Another way of asking the question to families is, has your relatives' general happiness changed? And the graph shows much happier. This is, I think, 112 families. Much happier, and same. And not one family said less happy or much less happy. And I've been doing social science for a while, and I've never seen anything like that. That's like night and day. That's overwhelming. You don't get that. So something strong happened to the families, and they grew to favor the community. Did people live longer? Because a lot of people were afraid they'd die young out in the community, that they'd be abandoned. And this graph, well, I'm just going to skim over it. It shows that in the end, there were about 200 people who lived up until the end of the graph, 1990, I think. that would have been dead if they had stayed at Pennhurst. We calculated the death rate at Pennhurst, death rate in the community, then we counted actual deaths of people who moved out and then died versus people who stayed in and died. All that kind of research, and we found out people live much longer moving to the community. So that's good. That's a good outcome. At my age, it's a really good outcome. Pennhurst cost study. We studied what it cost to society and found out that community programs actually cost less. That's a long story, but I'm just going to say one thing. It's because we paid staff less in the community. And that's coming back to bite us right now. You can't hire and keep good staff for that salary. Whereas people who worked at Pennhurst were state employees. They had state benefits and full salary, and they didn't want to lose those jobs. So we're making a big mistake right now by not raising salaries of these dedicated community workers. And one of them is right here. Would you like to introduce anybody? Julie?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is my attendant, Jewel, is working with me. So she is one of the staff person that's paid less, and we feel that they all deserve more. They all deserve more.
Well, they get combat pay to work with her.
Oh, shut up.
Thank you for your service.
We love each other.
I'll just say, this wasn't the only study, and I want everybody to know that this was the first study, but there were dozens of others, not just by our group, but all over the world. But our little group, we did the same thing with 1,300 people in Connecticut, 1,000 people in Oklahoma, 2,400 people in California, and so on. The study was repeated. We got the same results every time. Every other group, Minnesota, Arizona, France, India, they got the same results too. People went out of big congregate care institutions and got better lives at the same or lower cost. And that's the message. So I say this is a personal note, probably the most successful social experiment of the 20th century. Closing big institutions for people with disabilities. You've got another idea. Let's get back to that. But this really worked, and I didn't think it would, so that's why I'm perhaps overly enthusiastic. This graph shows the decline of institutional people, number of people in institutions. The green bars on the left show that from 1970 on, the number of people in institutions for people with intellectual disability went down, down, down. We're down to about 15,000 in America now. And on the right, red bars, is the number of people in small community homes being supported by Medicaid and state funding. And that graph just went up, 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 and it's now, right now it's over 600,000 people in America who live in these small settings, who would have been in institutions if not for this. Now, at last, the good part. Gene Searle's story.
I might ask you to help me.
I will.
This is a picture of my mom and dad on the wedding with my grandma and grandpa.
Let me read them and then you
Yeah.
can comment. I'm a Pennhurst class member now, and that's because,
And because I am with the Pennhurst.
right,
I was on the list to go to Pennhurst.
in the court defined the Pennhurst class, people, this is a class action lawsuit. The class was people who were at Pennhurst or at risk of going to Pennhurst. That was Gene.
But the only reason why I did go to Pennhurst is because I was asked to give a testimony to a judge here in Philadelphia. His name was Judge Broderick, and I was asked to give testimony on how it looked on the inside of an institution.
And whether you were better off when you got out.
Yeah, and I was on my way to the institution,
And so that, you were in a foster home and then you went to Allied Services.
yeah, But I took him to LI services.
Yeah, we did,
Never,
sure.
he has never saw an institution like LI services.
We went there in
And I thought it was
2010.
worth- And I thought it was worth a trip.
In fact, that was our visit. That person, that's Jean in the front. And Janine, the person behind Jean, was a direct service professional at the time Jean lived there. Now she's the director.
It's not,
She was,
she was.
during that photo.
Yeah, she was.
And she retired, I think.
Yes.
So we went up to visit, and I missed the good picture, which was Janine ran out and hugged Jean for like a minute. And you don't, places like that, you don't get successful graduates coming back to thank their teachers. This was a rare event. But Janine was wonderful and loving, and it just shows the people who worked there, they weren't the problem. The problem was us. We didn't fund enough to have enough people to teach little kids to walk. We just didn't know. And now the question is, do we care? So then you went to another school up near Scranton.
Yeah. Then I went to Still Meadow, and then, it was very isolated
But it
and
looked
very
pretty.
isolated. It was totally in the woods.
But it looked pretty.
And it looked so pretty, and living there was awful.
And we went there too.
This is Still Meadow, but we almost missed it because we drove by there, and we almost.
Well, by the time we got there, it was closed and overgrown.
Yes.
So we found these markers. And then we got to walk around.
And we got to walk the premises. And this is, almost my room. This is like up towards, the institution.
There were a couple hundred kids in there, right? Well, they were young adults, weren't
Yeah.
they? Age 22 and up. But it was an institution, only privately operated. At age 22, you had to leave.
At age 22, I left. I was almost sent to Pennhurst.
But the federal judge said closed admissions,
Yeah.
so you were diverted. In fact, let's see. Yeah, a Philadelphia provider agency came to Still Meadow and asked you if you'd like to live in a community cell.
Yes.
That was
and
Nancy and
They
Ed.
asked if I wanted to live in my own place with roommates. And I said yes. And these two people came out and they interviewed me, and I found out a week later I would be discharged from the institution. But
And they drove you.
I didn't go. But I did not go straight to my house. I had to go to the courthouse, and then that was when I was asked to give testimony
Oh, yeah,
to
Judge Brown.
Judge Broward.
This is the same judge who decided the case. He invited people who were affected by the case to come talk to him. Very unusual judge. One of my heroes, great guy.
Yeah, but he was a powerful judge, let me tell you.
Yeah, he was lieutenant governor when all this X hit the fan. In fact, Bill Baldini, shall I?
Go ahead. Just real fast.
Bill Baldini got this footage from his trip to Pennhurst, and it was mind-boggling, awful. And he drove to Raymond Broderick's house out on the main line, City Avenue. He drove there and just knocked on the door. And the judge came down in the bathroom and said, "What?" Like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. And Bill Baldini, the reporter, said, "I've got some film here that you have to see." And he let him. And at that time, this was Lieutenant Governor Raymond Broderick, saw what was going on at Pennhurst, and he said, in his voice, "I have to do something," and I knew it. And right then, he knew. Later, as he said to me, a few years later, Jim, I found myself on the bench of a federal court, and a case came before me. It was the Pennhurst case. He already knew he had to do something. So that's Judge Broderick, quite a guy.
Yeah, he was.
And they drove you, right?
Yeah, they
Nancy and
did.
Ed?
Yeah.
Still friends.
after all these years.
And
Yeah.
what they put people into is called a CLA.
It's a community living arrangement with other people.
And they didn't give you a job.
They told me that I was able, that I could pick out my own roommates and my own staff person. But by the time I got there, they were already there already. So they
And-
had already had staff and they already had people living there.
And during the day, you had to go 5 days a week to
The workshop,
sheltered workshop, which was about 200 people in a big industrial building.
but people that went to the workshop got paid very little money. Very little.
So that picture, do you remember that one?
I do remember that.
Tell.
With this picture, I was being, I was about to get ready to be discharged, and when people came to see you, you were only allowed to park right there. You couldn't go any further, you couldn't go any, that was it, that was the only place you were allowed to park. And so people went in, they had to sign their name, they had to say who they were here for, or who they here to see, are they thinking about the dinner, or they thinking about where, you know. And that was the only place you were allowed to park. Couldn't
And
go
that,
any
you
further.
told me, is where Nancy and Ed put you in their car and drove to
Yeah.
Philadelphia, right there.
Yep. Right, yep.
So you went to a CLA, community living arrangement, just like all the other Pennhurst class members. Was it better?
Yeah.
And then you,
And then I ended up getting my own home, and I had a job then I worked for, different companies, I worked for 2 different law firms. And I was able to make some money. I wanted to date, but I wasn't able to.
what anybody
Um,
what anybody my age wanted, and it took a while, but look at me now.
yeah.
By the way, we did these together, but I helped with the reading. Look at this, that's 45 minutes. Where's,
Yeah.
takeaways, this is how you're supposed to end. My father was a salesman, and he always said, you know, the old saw, tell him what you're gonna tell him, and then tell him, and then tell him what you told him. Here we are. Here's what I hope I told you. Pennhurst folks had intellectual disabilities, not mental illness. Even Bill Baldini had that mixed up. When he said he was ashamed of his story, it's because he was confused. He knew that people with mental illness were out on the street, not these people. So that's the number one confusion. Even my mom had trouble getting that right. Oh, they're different? Yeah, very. And their outcomes were wildly different. So, that's number one. Number two, people were better off in almost every way we knew how to measure. Biggest quality of life changes I had ever seen up to that point.
Yeah, but nobody thought that it was ever gonna happen. Everybody thought that people who lived in the community was gonna be nothing but, whack jobs, or whatever you wanna call them.
Yeah, what about the neighbors?
Yeah, the neighbors didn't want anybody with a disability near them, because they were afraid that they were gonna. either-
Dangers, property values,
Yeah,
that all went on, just like it did with race. Same sort of phenomenon. So the final thing I guess I'd say is Pennhurst's place in history is influenced the entire world. The United Nations CRPD, the Conference on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, was influenced heavily by Pennhurst because the world found out there's a better way from this. But anyway, the right to education I told you about, that happened because of Pennhurst. The right to education, then the right to treatment. The right to treatment happened because of a young man named Nicholas Romeo who was abused, and his case went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court decided Nick Romeo at Pennhurst never did anything wrong, and he had a right to treatment. And complicated order, but the Supreme Court found in favor of people's rights. And the third,
But his treatment was horrible.
Nineteen
Wasn't the
1984,
treatment that everybody else would get.
Philadelphia Inquirer, 1984, Nicholas Romeo, the unwitting revolutionary at Pennhurst. It's the most heartbreaking thing I ever saw. He was so abused. Well, the right to education, the right to treatment, Nick Romeo, hero. We bought him a star when he passed away.
We did.
You know, you can buy a star and name it after anybody. His family didn't know what he had meant to the world. He didn't speak, and he was the most dangerous man at Pennhurst. But for 22 years, he lived in the community with a loving family. Not family, they were paid to work with him, but he didn't have an outburst for 21 years after the first year. And we met him, we went to visit him. Anyway.
Actually, he came to visit us. That
Yeah.
that was on the other hand.
Well, miracles happen. So the right to treatment happened, and the right to live in the community was established by that last lawsuit. Judge Raymond Broderick, Halderman versus Pennhurst, it established that people have a right to try to live in the community, and then through research in Temple University, we were able to find out, hey, that worked. It is better. It does cost less. Families love it, and almost nobody wants to go back. And that is what nobody knows about what happened at Pennhurst. And that's it. Yes.
Folks on Zoom with questions, please type them into the chat considering the number of people we have here tonight, and then I will relay them. But anyone in the room, feel free.
How did you learn such excellent language, your use of language, your understanding? How did you learn that in your situation?
I have been through a lot in my life, and the one thing, is it okay if I just one thing that
Nobody wants to hear from you.
there was one thing that the both of us did together, and one day I was at his house, and I think I was eating some ice cream or something, and my nose got really cold and sore, and I wasn't able to eat anything really normally, and so we decided that I needed to go to a dentist. And so we were like looking, and we traveled all over like downtown and other areas, and we went to different areas, and this area we were like, and the problem was nobody would take my insurance. So any place that we went, the insurance company was like, nope, not happening. So we had this one person do some major research, and we found one dentist that was on Westchester Pike, and he took people with disabilities, and we were trying to figure out, should I just be put to sleep and have, do whatever he needs to do with my mouth and whatever. And then we said, well, if that happened, then I would have to be admitted to the hospital, which we didn't want to do that. So we decided that we were going to let the dentist take care of my mouth.
Implants.
Yes, but I was getting there if he would just. But first we were going to try dentures, but when I tried the dentures, it fit in my mouth. It was like so hard to eat and everything. So we decided that we wanted to get implants, and a couple times I said,
That was tough.
a couple times like I'm done, I quit, and it hurt so much I couldn't eat anything for 6 to 8 months. And then he made a mistake. He had to get my teeth out, and then when he did it, my lips got so sore that I couldn't really sip anything through a straw or anything. And so,
For 13 years that I knew you, 10 years, you had 17.
yeah, so,
Because in these institutional settings, dental care was not great.
but after all that, we decided to just, let him do it, and I'm so glad that
Smile.
I'm so glad that we did it, Chris.
And you asked about Jean's language, so
Yes, yes.
if I may, you went to school
Yes.
when Jean was in foster care. She was affected by the right to education. She got to go to school from about age 12 on. You were born in 1960.
62.
So, yeah, you were 10 when the right to education was signed. And boom, she got to go to a local school and you learned to read.
Learn to
And
read
that
and
was
learn how to
continued.
write. And
It's a new world, folks. Wouldn't have happened in a few decades before.
but can I just say something?
Another one? Yes.
There's something that we missed that we should have had on there. There was like, I think it was a couple years ago, that we did a video, we did 2 videos, maybe 3. One is called Going Home,
Oh, yeah.
and the other one is I Go Home. And
ITF.
WITF, huh?
WITF Harrison.
WITF had it on Channel 12. Yeah, at that time it was Channel 12. For a while, and then people were watching it, and they wanted to know about Pennhurst and how they were treated and the abuse and the food and the parents, and it was like everything. And so what they wanted to do another video was called Going Home, and that is where I'm in it. And the person who interviewed me, I guess she was either shocked or surprised about what I had told her on the
Oh,
video,
yeah.
on the video. And what they did is that when they showed that video, I had parents and people who watched it and people who, my family and friends and everybody said that they thought that was one of the best videos they have ever seen, because I went down to the, I just told them everything that they wanted to know.
And so did a lot of our friends. They told their stories.
Yeah.
WITF is public TV in Harrisburg. They did 2 really great pieces. They're still available.
Yeah,
And
it
then
is
you
on
and I
our,
did
it is
another
on our
video.
website.
Maybe we're running out of time, but we did another video about the need for a National Museum on Disability Rights. This is something that once people thought of it, everybody else says, well, duh. So we're working on that. We've been working on that 5 years.
Questions from people on Zoom. What is Pennhurst now? Are the buildings still being used? And a follow-up, how does it feel now that the buildings are a haunted asylum attraction?
The buildings are empty, but they're being renovated by the new owners. The property, the main campus property was sold in 2008 to a private company, and they were going to develop it into housing and maybe a community college and senior care. But 2008, there was a crash. They couldn't do anything. And they decided, well, a lot of other prisons and psychiatric hospitals have a Halloween attraction downtown. Eastern State Penitentiary raised all their money every year from Terror Behind the Walls, a Halloween attraction. So they decided to do this, and it was, we fought it for 10 years. Their imagery was horrendously painful, ugly, demeaning, insulting. They hired actors to act like people with disabilities to scare the people who came.
Talk about,
Just horrible.
tell them about the interview that you and I did with them, ex-co-owner, how he took us out to lunch and spoiled us and telling us stories that, we wanted to hear and.
Yeah, they promised dignity and caution and so forth, and then the next day on Facebook,
We found out that they were gonna use Pennhurst as imagery of people with disabilities.
they had pictures on the Facebook. It was an ad for actors. And the pictures were of a guy in a straitjacket, another guy getting brain surgery, and just, ugly pictures. And the caption was, "Would you like to play a scary psycho?" The day after we met, when they promised us dignity and respect.
And we were very disappointed, but one of our lawyers went out Saturday and did some protest.
Yeah, the demonstration was like 5 people. But since somebody on the Zoom wrote in, how do we feel about it now? Well, I got a pretty happy story about it. We fought this for 10 years, and then new owners bought it. And it's changed. One night after midnight, after a filming of one of those stupid ghost shows, I was there, because, they always called and said, "What's the real history?" And they always found me, so I had to do it. Well, after midnight, I met, by chance, the new operations manager of the new owners. And we just hit it off, and he said, "We use your website to learn the history of this place." I said, "How come? We used to be enemies." And he said, "Oh, the days of insulting people who lived and died here are over." And I said, "Why?" His name is Jim Warner, operations manager. I said, "Why?" And he said, "I have 3 daughters with disability, and that shit is done. I'll never forget it." And they have. They've taken away 90% of the insulting imagery, and you can talk for ages and ages. There's a bottom line that will always last in my head. The haunted house is created. It produces enough money to create a museum, which is now up and running every Saturday in warmer weather, and to preserve the buildings, fix the roofs, produce a lot of money. They set up a charity for people like Jean. We were going to pay for Jean's leg fixing if she needed it, and so on and so forth. But things have changed, and yet we fought it for a long time. Well, there's so much to be said. I'll just say the final thing is, not the final thing. Would you do a haunted house at Auschwitz? And the answer is always no.
Yeah, but you and I fought good and hard to make sure all the imagery was good.
Yeah.
We
And
fought
I've gone to it
every
almost
day.
every year.
Yeah.
We've been together.
Yeah,
We go, we walk through it, and we see,
Yeah.
he's doing better, and they're doing better and better. And now PMPA, Pennhurst Memorial Preservation Alliance, is kind of partners with the owners. We have exhibits in their museum, and we're trying to raise funds for the museum, and so on and so forth. It's all, they got 30 or 50,000 people coming through that haunted house. And now, they can also go through the museum, and they can learn the real history. It turns out that people who are interested in ghosts and paranormal bought more of our books than the entire Disability Association, because they're really interested. So it's kind of a win. Thousands of young people learning every year. There's a civil rights movement we didn't even know about. So it's a double-edged sword and mixed feelings, but there you go.
Can you, all right, before we get to, someone asked what the website is. What's your web address?
PreservePennhurst.org. No periods, no nothing, no capitals.
What was that again?
PreservePennhurst.org. One word.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you've done so much for so many, and it's great to be reassured that there are people like you out there. Like both of you, I mean, I want to make sure I acknowledge what you mean. The question I have is, you mentioned that you traveled around the world looking at similar institutions. Are other countries getting to the same evolution in deinstitutionalization?
Yes. Britain did it pretty much. Ireland, France, Mexico's working on it, but very slow. Everybody's at a different stage. Ukraine was starting when things went sideways. I landed in Kiev on the day the Russians shut down that jet, and they shut down the airport in Ukraine. I couldn't get out. So Disability Rights International has been bringing this message all over the world. And the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is the United Nations Convention, and Article 19, because of all this, says no person should live in or grow up in an institution because of this. That's why Pennhurst is so significant in the world. We learned there's a better way. We may have done Pennhurst with good intentions, but there is a better way.
Yeah, but when the international, but when you were asked to give a talk at the United Nations, they were looking for a South advocate to talk about the institution and, you know, everything that went inside of it. And I guess one of his friends or one of our friends asked if I could go with them to the United Nations and give a talk. So I was the only self-advocate that was able to go to the United Nations for the very first time to give a talk about the institution. So,
Kind of came a long way.
you just young because it wasn't you.
No. Another thing, usually she gets a standing ovation, I get nothing.
What year was that you went to the United Nations?
2018.
I think 2018.
There's quite a disability, an active disability community in the United Nations now. But the knowledge that other countries, well, New Zealand had lots of institutions. And one of the guys who worked on the Pennhurst case moved to New Zealand and became director of services for people with intellectual disabilities. And he got a couple copies of the Pennhurst thing, don't read. And he passed it around and everybody read it. And 5 years later, New Zealand became the first nation on earth to have nobody in an institution. So it's really had an impact. Yes?
On this long journey of creating more freedom and respect for people with disabilities, what in your opinion is the next big step to create a better situation than what exists even today?
Two responses. One, I don't know, because back then we couldn't envision what's happening now, and I'm the old guard. I can't envision what they're going to do next. Maybe there'll be homes with AI. I don't know. But second answer, we got to fix what we did right now. People are underpaid, staff turnover is horrible, and group homes are just crumbling. The infrastructure is dying. This wonderful thing we did is in danger of crumbling because our legislature, won't support the community program. Staff hadn't raised for 11 years because the legislature wouldn't increase anything, not a dime. Just, that's it. All my life I avoided politics, but sometimes that's what it takes. And every time you visit a representative locally, they will be very friendly because everybody has a relative or a friend with a disability, and they know. Doesn't matter your political party, they know. That's why there will be a national museum. Party doesn't matter. Everybody knows somebody and everybody cares.
I think we should end with this comment from one of our people on Zoom. God bless you, Gene and Jim, for all your work to make life better for many individuals. Thank you both. Thank you both.
Thanks for